So now to store all that metadata in a database on the device so that it's still available even if the app restarts, I'll go back here to the user places dart file in that providers folder. And here, after copying the image, and maybe after creating this new place, I now want to reach out to that SQL database and store the data in there. Now to do that, we'll need to import some extra packages into this file. We need to import the SQLite package, and then from there, the SQLite Dart file, and also another file, and that would be the SQLite API.dart file. So SQLite Dart and just SQLite API Dart. These two files from the SQF package must be imported here. And with them imported, we can now reach out to the database by assigning an alias to that first import, to the SQLite import of SQL, to get easy access under one namespace to the entire package content, or to the entire content of this file to be precise. And now we can use this SQL object here to access the package content. And here I'll call getDatabasePath, which does what the name implies. It in the end returns a future that will eventually yield the path of the database on the device. So here we'll get the DB path, and we can await this, of course. And once we get that path, we should execute SQL open database to open a database in a given path. And now it's not this path, but instead a path we have to create with help of this path package. Because this package gives us a join method, which can be used to construct a path. And here we want to join this DB path, so this path we got here, with any database name of our choice. Because DB path does not point at a specific database, but just at a directory where we may create our database. But to create the database or use an existing database, we then also must specify the database name when trying to open it. And if you try to open a database that doesn't exist yet, this SQLite package will automatically create the database for you. So that's quite convenient. So here I'll name it places.db, and you should end with .db here. And with that, we'll have a database that's either opened or created. Now, open database also takes another parameter here, actually a couple of parameters as you see, but here it's the onCreate parameter that we should set. OnCreate then takes a function as a value, and this function will be executed when this database is created for the first time. So if this file in the database path is not found, as mentioned, the file will be created for you, but then this function will also be executed. And this function is executed to allow you to perform some initial setup work. Now for that, to perform that work, you should actually return a future in your function. So here we should return something. And that something should in the end be the result of executing a so-called database query. A query that should be executed initially when the database is created to make sure it's configured appropriately. For that, we can use this DB value, which we're getting here, which in the end gives us access to the database that was just created. And on that, we can run the execute command to execute a SQL query. Now, this is not a SQL course. I do have a separate course on that if you would want to learn more about it. Therefore, here I will just give you the query that should be executed. And the query is create table user underscore places. The table name is up to you, but you should always use the same table when interacting with it. And then thereafter you have opening and closing parentheses, where we in the end now specify the columns, the fields, you could say, that make up this table. And here I want to have an ID field, which will be of type text, and that's how you write this in SQL, and which will be my primary key. So in the end, the unique identifier of an entry in that table. And then separated by a comma, I define my next column, which I'll name title, which contains some text. Then a comma, image, text. And an image will be text because I will only store the image path, not the entire file, just the path to the file instead. And then for the location, I'll add a field called lat, which will be of type real, which in the end is a number with decimal values in SQL. And then an LNG field, which is also a real for the latitude and longitude. And last but not least, for the human readable address, I'll add the address field, which is of type text. Now with that, there's just one thing left. After specifying onCreate here, on this open database function call, you should also add the version parameter and set this to 1. And theoretically, you should increase this whenever you change this query so that a new database file would be created if you would change the structure of the database. Of course, you can learn more about this SQF Lite package and its various features on the official package page. With that though, we're opening the database and we have our initial configuration code in case it should be needed. And now open database will in the end yield a future which will then eventually give us that database with which we can work. So here I'll get that database by awaiting for open database. And now in the line thereafter, we can finally work with the database, which will have been opened or initialized. And here I now want to insert my data, my title and so on, into this user places table. For that, we can use the insert method on that DB object that was returned by Open Database. And now this wants the name of the table where the data should be inserted, in this case user_places, and then the different values that should be inserted. Now the values should be a map where the keys are basically your column names, ID, title, image, and so on. And the values are then, well, the values for those columns. So here it's a new map where I want to set ID equal to new place ID. And therefore, I guess you should create this object before storing it in a database so that you have this ID, since this is created by the place constructor. Then for the title column, I want to store new place.title. And it's really important that these keys here match the names set up here in the onCreate function, because we're now assigning values to those columns here. Now for the image, as mentioned, it's not the file, but the path of the image. And therefore here it's this new place, and then the image, and this image file has a path property which holds the path. For lat, it's new place, location, latitude. And for LNG, it's new place, location, longitude. And then last but not least, for the address, it's of course new place, location, address. And with that, we're storing all that data in the database.